Thomas Hobbes peered into humanity's dark heart and saw chaos, a war of all against all, where life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Without rules, he warned, we revert to beasts, each man prey to another's appetite. For Hobbes, the state of nature is a war zone, and obedience to authority our only refuge from anarchy. To escape the state of nature, Hobbes argued, we forge a leviathan, a sovereign, endowed with absolute power by collective consent. We trade some liberty for security, vesting the monarch or assembly with the right to enforce peace. In Hobbes' contract, obedience is not submission to tyranny, it is the price of survival. A generation later, John Locke reshaped the contract. He insisted we are born with inalienable rights, life, liberty, and property. Government exists not to dominate, but to protect these gifts of nature. For Locke, authority derives from the governed's will. If a ruler betrays the contract, the people may reclaim their sovereignty. Locke's social contract hinges on consent. We entrust power to leaders, but only so long as they act for the common good. Elections, assemblies, and charters become the sacred rituals of political life. Here, obedience is not blind, it is a pledge renewed by each citizen's signature. Jean Rousseau, who challenged both Hobbes and Locke. He argued the true freedom lies in obeying laws we prescribe to ourselves. The general will is not the sum of private interests, but the common good that transcends them. Under Rousseau's contract, obedience to law is obedience to our own shared humanity. Rousseau's general will honors the common good, but at what cost to the individual? When personal desires clash with collective decisions, dissenters risk being seen as enemies of freedom. The contract binds us together, yet it can also bind us against ourselves, reminding us that unity demands sacrifice. Not all consent is explicit. We often obey laws simply by remaining within orders, paying taxes, or using public services. This tacit consent quietly cements the contract, but it also obscures the choice. Inaction becomes agreement, and many live under chains they never realize they forged. When governments betray the social contract, when they oppress rather than protect, citizens may reclaim their sovereignty through civil disobedience. Thoreau and Gandhi taught that noble resistance can renew the contract spirit. Obedience, after all, is earned. When power becomes illegitimate, defiance becomes duty. Today's states trace their lineage to Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. Constitutions codify rights, parliaments debate laws, courts arbitrate disputes. Yet debates rage over surveillance, inequality, and emergency powers. The social contract evolves, but its core question remains: what do we owe one another, and what do we owe the state? In an interconnected world, the social contract extends beyond borders. Climate change, pandemics, digital rights. These global challenges demand a contract among nations and peoples. Our shared fate calls for new forms of consent and responsibility. As we obey local laws, must we also honor a higher pact, solidarity with all humanity? We revere liberty as the crown jewel of the social contract, yet its exercise can threaten the very order that protects it. When speech offends or assembly disrupts, we grapple with limits. Do we criminalize harm or defend freedom? This paradox lies at the heart of every democracy, balancing individual rights against collective stability. Hobbes might have cheered for the peace such watchfulness brings, but Locke would recoil at its cost to privacy. In the 21st century, we trade personal data for protection against threats both real and imagined. Yet each byte collected chips away at the natural rights we once held inviolable. A government's power rests on legitimacy. Citizens trust that laws serve the common good. When corruption seeps in, or leaders break oaths, that trust fractures. The social contract must be renewed through transparency and accountability. For a broken contract breeds cynicism and unrest. Advances in technology promise direct democracy at the push of a button. Digital referendums could let us shape laws instantly. Yet in the rush of immediacy, do we risk shallow deliberation? True consent requires more than clicks. It demands thoughtful debate, informed understanding, and the patient forging of consensus. Most of us remain silent, content to let others speak and decide. This silent majority can endorse or subvert the contract by inaction. Their quiet consent is powerful, yet precarious, because the contract survives not only by voices raised, but by those who choose not to raise theirs. In times of crisis, war, plague, terror, states often invoke emergency powers that suspend ordinary rule. Hobbes saw this as necessary to avert chaos, while Locke warned of the slippery slope toward despotism. When fear tightens its grip, do we surrender our liberties willingly, or are we coerced by the promise of safety? The crisis becomes the proving ground of the social contract's resilience. Locke insisted that consent must accompany governance, including the right to levy taxes. No taxation without representation became the rallying cry against tyranny. Yet in modern democracies, many pay taxes yet feel unheard. When voices go uncoated, the contract phrase raising the question, who truly speaks for the governed? The rule of law holds that laws apply equally and protect rights. Rule by law uses laws as instruments of power, selectively enforced, arbitrarily interpreted. The social contract bans the former, justice as a bulwark against tyranny. When laws become weapons, obedience morphs into complicity and injustice. Global challenges, climate change, pandemics, migration, demand social contracts that transcend borders. Traditional nation-state agreements falter against shared threats. Can we forge a global contract where humanity, not citizenship, defines our fellowship? The future hinges on our ability to obey obligations to each other, regardless of flags. The social contract is more than rules to obey. It's duties to uphold. Voting, civic engagement, protest, these are not optional extras, but the heartbeat of collective life. We accept laws. The laws demand react. In that mutual exchange lies the promise of freedom, anchored in responsibility. Citizenship is learned, not innate. Schools and public discourse are workshops where we renew the social contract, understanding rights, debating duties, and rehearsing the art of self-governance. When education falters, so does consent, leaving societies vulnerable to manipulation and apathy. True consent demands the right to dissent. Protesters occupy the margins, challenging power and reigniting public debate. The social contract survives not by silencing dissent, but by listening to it, transforming grievances into reforms, and ensuring that obedience remains a choice, not a command. Transparency is the lifeblood of legitimate authority. In the digital age, technology can illuminate governance. Live stream debates, open budgets, real-time feedback. When rulers hide behind walls, suspicion grows. When citizens see, they trust, and consent becomes genuine. Our social contract extends beyond people to the planet itself. We inherit air, water, and soil from past generations and owe their stewardship to the future. Obedience to environmental laws isn't just civic duty. It's a pact with all life that sustains us. Break it, and the contract unravels. As we chart the post-human era, obedience will take new forms: smart laws, predictive policing, AI juries. But the question remains timeless. Will we obey rules because they serve the common good, or because we cannot refuse? The answer will define whether our future is one of liberation or another set of chains. Beyond voting, true self-governance arises when citizens shape laws themselves, through assemblies, referenda, participatory budgets. In these spaces, obedience is not passive. It is active engagement. When people craft the rules, the contract becomes a living pact, not a brittle decree. Social media offers unprecedented forms for discourse, but its algorithms amplify outrage and silence nuance. The contract's renewal depends on healthy dialogue, yet echo chambers fracture consensus. We must wield these tools responsibly, ensuring that obedience to truth outweighs obedience to trend. In an interconnected world, our obligations transcend national contracts. Climate crises, pandemics, digital rights, these demand a global social contract. We share fate with distant strangers. Our obedience to local laws must expand into solidarity with all humanity. Absolute sovereignty can become tyranny. When states wield unchecked power, surveilling, censoring, excluding, they break the contract they were formed to uphold. To preserve freedom, sovereignty must be balanced by rights, checks, and the ever-watchful eye of the governed. At the heart of the social contract lies a vow to obey laws that protect our shared life, and to challenge those that betray it. This vow is renewed with every act of conscience, every vote cast, every voice raised, every duty fulfilled. In that promise, we find the true power of obedience, not as submission, but as the highest expression of collective freedom. Trust is the mortar that holds the social contract together. When governments deliver on promises, justice, safety, prosperity, trust flourishes, and obedience flows freely. But once broken, rebuilding that bridge demands transparency, accountability, and time. Only then can the governed and their governors walk hand in hand once more. Philosophers from Aristotle to the founders believed that a healthy republic rests on virtuous citizens. Obedience to law isn't enough. We must cultivate courage to speak truth, temperance to respect difference, and wisdom to discern justice. The social contract thrives when character matches constitution. Behind every law are those who implement it. Judges interpreting statutes, teachers fostering informed citizens, medics protecting lives. Civil servants are the stewards of the contract, charged with translating words on parchment into lived reality. Their integrity determines whether obedience enriches or erodes our common life. Silence is consent, but silence can also be lethal. When citizens grow apathetic, failing to vote, to question, to act, the social contract withers. Power drifts into the hands of the few, and laws serve interests, not the public good. Apathy is the quiet thief of democracy. The social contract is not sealed once and for all. It lives in every generation's debate, in every reform, in every courageous act of conscience. From Hobbes' Leviathan to global climate accords, each renewal speaks. We choose to bind ourselves to each other for life's sake. And so long as we keep writing, discussing, and renewing, the contract endures, ever alive, ever ours to uphold. True obedience is never mindless, it thrives on dialogue. When a citizen stands to remonstrate, they invoke the contract's promise that grievances will be heard and addressed. Remonstrance rekindles engagement, reminding rulers that power originates in consent, and that silence can never substitute for justice. Art and culture animate the social contract, translating abstract ideals into living stories. Murals, songs, and plays remind us of past struggles and future hopes. Through creativity, we reaffirm why we obey laws, because they spring from shared dreams of dignity, freedom, and community. Pandemics test the social contract like few crises can. We submit to lockdowns and mandates, trusting that sacrifices protect the vulnerable. But when measures overstretch or transparency falters, trust erodes. In crisis, the contract's strength is measured by how well it balances public safety with individual rights. Economic structures shape our ability to fulfill the contract. When wealth concentrates and opportunities vanish, equality of rights rings hollow. A just contract demands not only legal equality, but fair access to prosperity, a guarantee that every citizen can truly enjoy life, liberty, and property. Our contract extends beyond the human into the web of life itself. Environmental stewardship is the covenant we forge with future generations. Obedience to climate accords and conservation laws honors the pact that sustains us all. Break it, and we forfeit not just rights, but the very earth we share. In the digital age, privacy and expression become modern liberties. Access to information, protection from surveillance, net neutrality, these are the new battlegrounds of the social contract. As we navigate cyberspace, we must enshrine digital rights alongside our ancient freedoms. A contract built on consent collapses when truth becomes suspect. Disinformation floods public discourse, eroding the common knowledge that laws rely upon. Guardians of the contract must defend truth through education, transparent media, and critical inquiry to preserve the shared reality that underpins consent. Borders define the limits of a social contract, but in an interconnected world, the plight of refugees becomes a moral test. Do we extend the contract's protections to those beyond our lines? Justice demands we weigh sovereignty against compassion, expanding or redefining the contract to include all who seek its refuge. When corporations harvest our data for profit, they stake claims on parts of our lives. Surveillance capitalism undermines the contract's promise of individual autonomy. To restore balance, we must demand transparency, consent, and fair value for our digital selves. The social contract is not static, it lives through our continuous renewal. Through protest, reform, dialogue, and civic care, we breathe fresh life into our shared covenant. As each generation stands, plants its saplings, and inks its charters, we affirm that obedience far from servitude is the living practice of our collective freedom. Our contract with one another must evolve with the times, embracing digital tools, climate combats, and global solidarity. In this hall of renewal, every signature is more than ink or code. It's a promise to write a better future together. We see ourselves in our institutions. When the mirror is cracked by injustice or apathy, we must repair it. Golden seams of reform and dialogue remind us that the strength of our contract lies in confronting flaws and restoring trust. Every active participation, voting, volunteering, speaking truth, plants a seed of collective resilience. These saplings grow into the forests of democracy, shading future generations with the promise of shared governance. Beyond borders and barriers, our voices join a global chorus. Whether in local town halls or online platforms, we must ensure that every voice, no matter how small, adds its note to the harmony of our shared human contract. The social contract is neither relic nor code. It is a living covenant, ever unfolding. So long as we tend its flame with courage, compassion, and conviction, our obedience becomes not submission, but the finest expression of our collective freedom.